Starliner Media. Starliner Media presents Music Night at the Majestic with your host, Michael Boswell.
All right, it's time once again for Music Night at the Majestic, and with us tonight, Jim Photoglo. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
It's great to be here. The first time I became aware of you was when you had appeared on American Bandstand. When you were doing We Were Meant to Be Lovers back in 1980. So going back a year or two.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Now, what was that like, to find yourself on American Bandstand sitting there talking with Dick Clark?
Well, it's kind of like the movies, you finally get to meet your heroes. I mean, I grew up with Dick Clark. And, obviously it wasn't his first rodeo. He could not have been more, you're going to be fine. He was great. And, that whole period, I was doing a lot of those, well, not only the music shows, but all the talk shows. And it was an amazing time.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, obviously, that wasn't where you started. You had to get your start musically somewhere. Did you grow up in a musical household?
Well, just in terms of my parents always made sure that we all learned instruments. I studied piano and guitar as a kid. My sister studied piano. My brother studied piano and violin. My mother studied piano. It wasn't as though this is what you're going to do. I'm the son of immigrants. So, music was for joy and nourishment. It wasn't a way to make a living. It was always a part of it. I mean, AM radio, I grew up on AM radio. I grew up on the Ed Sullivan Show,
Mm-hmm.
I was 5 when I saw Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show, and that was it. There was no going back for me.
Yeah, well, a lot of our guests, the two probably most common defining moments, of musical divine intervention for them were either Elvis on Ed Sullivan or Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
Well, it was the 1-2 punch. I have a song that I wrote called "The Halls of My Heart," and it's a cycle about 3 artists. The first artist is Elvis Presley, because I was 5 years old when I saw him. The second was Brian Wilson, because Brian Wilson grew up in the adjoining community that I grew up in. At the time, he was a few years older than me, so he sort of captured the feeling of my environment. And then there was Paul McCartney. So the song sort of spans that gap between the first inspiration and the end of the cycle. When Elvis went into the army, Brian, bless his heart, kind of lost his mind, and Paul left the Beatles. And it's about the inspiration. It's about the arc of the artist's career. Hope that answered your question. I kind of went off on it.
Yeah, no. Well, tell me this, as you're talking about, Elvis, the Beatles, and Brian, favorite Elvis song?
Well, again, I sort of like the Elvis before the army. Mm-hmm. Although I did have a 45 of Big Hunk of Love, which he did during the army. But no, the Sun Session stuff for me, the pre-RCA rockabilly, rock and roll. I mean, he's there are no favorites for me in terms of that guy. He had a brilliant career. Yeah.
For me, it's like whatever mood I'm in.
Yeah.
Now because with Elvis, you've got those eras. You've got the raw Sun era.
Sure.
Then you've got the smoother but yet still rockin' RCA era.
Yeah.
When you've got the post-army movie era.
Yeah.
Then you've got the 70s era.
Yeah.
And there's stuff that I love from each of those eras. But whatever, if somebody says, well, what's your favorite? It all depends on what mood I'm in at that particular moment.
Well, sure. And the other thing for me is Hound Dog is the song that always stood out to me as what I first heard. And as an adult, I heard Big Mama Thornton's Hound Dog.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my goodness, what a difference.
Uh-huh.
So, for Elvis, I'm forever grateful for having lit the fire. I was an absolute AM radio junkie, and right there at the beginning of the FM radio boom. As I look at my, just having passed 70 years old, I in some ways I feel like I grew up at the right time, musically speaking,
Right. Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned growing up listening to AM radio.
Yeah.
What I miss was the diversity of the playlist that radio had back then.
Yes.
79 was probably the end of that era where you could turn on AM radio and you'd hear pop, you'd hear rock, you'd hear AC, you'd hear country, whatever was popular, you would hear it. And now everything is so regimented, so formatted, and the playlists are so much smaller than what they used to be.
Right.
So, everybody, harkens back for those days, but yet what amazes me is nobody in the radio business has said, everybody seems to be clamoring for a diversity type playlist like we used to do, but no one's doing it.
Right. Well, it's a very different music business than the one I grew up in. And that is for sure. My friend Gary Burr and I wrote a song called Sparks in the Radio, which is about growing up at that time before video, when we had to use our imagination. And the music itself painted these wonderful pictures. Like I say, it was a great time to grow up and be alive.
Yeah. Now, how about what's some of your favorite Beach Boys or Brian Wilson songs?
Oh, well, I love Don't Worry, Baby. I love Good Vibrations, Surf's Up. I think when Brian really was in his peak era of creativity, it was something to behold. Again, what we were witnessing at that time was, and I know it's been sort of billed as a competition between the Beatles and the Beach Boys, but what you had is people who were growing creatively. The technology was growing. And again, what Brian and the Beatles did when they did it is nothing short of a miracle, considering the technology, especially when young people try to listen to it now and compare to what they're listening to now. If the Beatles had the technology available to them that we have now, they may still be in the studio. but it was just brilliant. And I mean, in their case, my God, the entire span of their recorded career is 7 years, and it was accomplished before any of them had turned 30.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to you can't change anything in the line of their history. It was sort of almost preordained, but totally random at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm getting a little out there.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, at times I wonder, if not having access to all the technology that we have in the studio now spurs more creativity than the technology does today.
Well, there were things they had to do. I mean, I had the opportunity to attend a panel. It was a one-person panel. It was Jeff Emmerich, the engineer who worked with the Beatles very early on, and then came back and I think was first engineer as of Revolver. And then I think in the White Album, he left, came back for Abbey Road, and then continued to work with Paul. They had recorded 2 versions of Strawberry Fields in 2 different studios on different days in different keys at different tempos. And John says to Jeff Emmerich, I want the second half of one and the first half of another, make it work. And by varying the speed of the 2 versions, they managed to get them at the same tempo, at the same key. And if you listen to the chorus, the second chorus, it goes, let me take you down because I'm growing. And it's like a door opens, and it's that edit. They edited the master tape, so one goes right into the other, and it just sounds like a door opened, and there's a mood change, and it's brilliant. And it's completely random. Now you can do that with a couple of buttons, no big deal.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Jim, where, you had to find a way to do something as opposed to go, like you say, oh, well, hit this button and that button, or, this preset, will do it for you.
Yeah. I mean, now we can, before when everything was on tape, if you sped something up, it raised the pitch. You slowed it down, it lowered the pitch. Well, now you can do any or all of that digitally. If you want something faster, but kept at the same tempo, you just squash it a little bit. It's nuts.
Yeah. Well, to me, technology is always a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
There's some things about it that are just absolutely wonderful that helps. And then there's, you've got the downside where, it's more of a hindrance than a help.
Right.
Yeah. So, but tell you what, getting back to your songs, Fool in Love with You.
Yeah.
That track for me, is one of the defining songs of 80s soft rock, adult contemporary, whatever you want to call it. Yacht rock, what have you. Yeah. That's got such a great groove, and that repeated motif throughout the song is great. Tell us the story behind Fool in Love with You.
Well, that's way back in the beginnings of, let me see, that was 1980 that we were writing that. I had a single out previously called We Were Meant to Be Lovers, and we were getting ready to do another album. I was pretty much exclusively writing with my producer at that time, Brian Neary. And, we... Of all apologies to Michael McDonald, who has become a good friend since then. As a matter of fact, Michael and I have written and performed together, and he released a single from an album called Blue Obsession called The Meaning of Love that he and I wrote together. But back in the day, everybody was jumping on Michael's bandwagon, as did we. So that's what we did. We created a sound-alike record, and it got a lot of radio play. And the good news is, it had my name on it, and it's a very unusual name. So it got a lot of radio play and blah, blah, blah. It actually got me talking about the Beach Boys. I've opened 13 shows for the Beach Boys in 1981.
Oh, wow.
Behind the strength of that song. And it just got a ton of radio play, and the distribution arm of the record label couldn't get records in the stores for some reason. So by 83, I was broke, and that was that. Pretty funny to have had all of that attention and be broke. Again, the good news was my name was so unusual that people remembered it, and So consequently, when I ran out of money, I got a call from Andy Gibb, who, actually from his manager, who said that Andy was a fan. They were putting together a tour to bring Andy back from retirement. And I got hired to be a background singer one day after finding out I was bankrupt. So that saved that. I went out on the road with Andy, and one day I went to a wedding, a mutual friend's wedding, and I met an artist by the name of Wendy Waldman. Mm-hmm. And we acknowledged that we had heard of one another. One thing led to another. She and I started writing. She had been going to Nashville, Tennessee. She invited me to come visit. And in just a matter of a few weeks, I wrote a collection of songs with Wendy and other people there that went on to have a lot of radio activity on country radio. And the biggest one of those songs, the most successful one, is a song called Fishin in the Dark, which was recorded by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band in 1986. It's a number one record in 1987, and has been a life-changing record. It was a career-changing record for them because it didn't sound like anything else on country radio. It was a big record for me because all of the contemporary country artists grew up singing it. So Kenny Chesney used to play it in concert. Garth Brooks plays it in concert, has released it, his own version of the song, 4 times.
Wow.
So, it's been interesting. And by the way, in 2016, 30 years after the song was released, I was having breakfast with Jeff Hanna, who's the lead singer of the Dirt Band, founding member of the Dirt Band. And he and I have been friends because of the record, but also he's married to a woman by the name of Matresa Berg, who's a brilliant songwriter. She and I have written songs together. She's an old friend. So Jeff and I are having breakfast one morning, and he says, so the Dirt Band's going to hire a bass player. And I said, I do that. And he went, oh, yeah. And that was that. So in 2016, I joined the Dirt Band, and I'm still playing with them.
Yeah, it always amazes me how so many, chance meetings, coincidences, whatever, end up making, huge impacts on people's lives and create songs and, all that stuff.
Well, I mentioned my producer, Brian Neary. I had met him singing background vocals on demos for him. He got hired in 1976 to, I guess the best way to say it is adorn a party that was being thrown by Paul McCartney at the Harold Lloyd Estate, 1976, to commemorate the end of his Wings Over America tour. And Paul was doing this as a gesture to his band, his crew, and it was called the White Party. And all the guests were invited to wear white so that an airbrush painter who was there, airbrush artist, could adorn their clothes. And it was a who's who of rock and roll in those days. Rod Stewart, Britt Eklund, The Who, Cream, Chicago. I was standing watching a conversation between Ringo and Keith Moon, and Frank Zappa was sitting over behind them, and Paul and Linda walked up. So that was my introduction to the music business. So yeah, I got to meet a lot of interesting people. Fast forward, my friend Gary Burr and I, he and I have written a lot of songs together. And Gary went to work for Carole King on her living room tour. I want to say about 10 years ago or so. And she wanted to continue doing, it was basically her and 2 people accompanying her. And she wanted to continue to do something like that one of the people that Gary and she had worked with had passed on, so she needed a replacement. Anyway, he recommends me to Carole King. And in the process, she says, well, I'm going to come to Nashville because I want to meet Jim. Gary talks her into doing a show at the Bluebird Cafe, an in the round show, what we do, where the four songwriters sit in the middle of the room and swap songs. So on this particular night, it was going to be Gary, his wife, Georgia, and Carole and I. And she said, well, since we're doing this, let's just kind of get together and, work up some songs. So I walk in the house the first day to practice with Carole King. She walks up to me, throws her arms around me, and she says, you're going to do fine on my songs. I want to learn your songs so I can play along. And I'm thinking, you're Carole King. Again, we did that show at the Bluebird, and then we did about 3 or 4 private shows, what they call industrial shows for private companies and all. And first of all, Gary is one of my closest friends. I introduced him to his wife, Georgia. The 3 of us were singing background to the First Lady of Popular Song. And it was just that. I have a tape somewhere of us practicing Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? And in the outro, she's crying. And we're all just trying to hold it back. There's nothing to describe how it feels singing with people you love, adorning music that had such a huge impact on you. She's just really something, man. I mean, and brilliant beyond what we all know about what she knows and what she can do and what she did and what she was really responsible for that nobody knows. And in this process, she released an album of her demos from that era. And when you go back and listen to that, you see where all of these people got their ideas when they recorded her songs, from the Righteous Brothers to Bobby V to Aretha, you name it. It's all there in her demos. They say don't ever meet your heroes. Well, that's not the case with her, because she's she's a little bitty person and an enormous human being. And all that stuff that you suspect about her talent, you have no idea. It's just beyond. And she's just so normal. I mean, as normal as anybody can be who has been through what she's been through. She's just, I'm a fan. Need I say more?
That's stories like that, Jim, always amaze me. Yeah. I'll tell you, along a similar line, you mentioned about, opening for the Beach Boys back in 81. Uh-huh. Having grown up listening to them, on AM radio, as you said, what was it like? What was going through your mind when you went out there for the first time on tour with the Beach Boys?
Well, first of all, we were playing in front of 22,000 people or so a night. So there's that. This was my first tour. I was artist, boss, financier. I was it all. It wasn't fun. I need a lot of sleep to sing every night, and I need a lot of rest. So I wasn't able to have fun like everybody else was having. It was, I don't know. I just don't know how to describe it. It was surreal is what it was. Mm-hmm. Surreal. Because it's like 20 years, 15 years, I guess, past when I actually learned about the Beach Boys. And then finding out, the Wilson family lived in Hawthorne and the Love family lived in Inglewood. They were adjoining communities. I lived in Inglewood. So I grew up with Stephanie Love and Stan Love of the Love family. So when I was there, touring with these guys. Well, the funny thing that happened was out of the whole tour, I had one gig at Disney World and Mike Love and his band opened for me. That was bizarre. But then just talking with Mike about, hey, I know your brother and your sister and la, 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 la. And it's like, it was too weird.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, another duo that I'm sure had a big impact on you, the Everly Brothers. Then, you flash forward to 85, they record 2 of your songs on Born Yesterday, one of which had been a single for you. What was that like?
Well, again, in both cases, I still see Don Everly around town, and I run into him in the grocery store, and I was in there one time, and we didn't interact, but he was behind me in the checkout line, so I stood there and bagged his groceries. And then after he left, didn't say we know each other, that just did it. After he left, the cashier looked at me and I said, that was Don Everly, and her face fell. That to me, I was honoring royalty.
Uh-huh.
I have had the chance to speak with both of them, and both of them apologized because the album wasn't more successful. And I said, you just don't understand. And couldn't be sweeter. Small world. It just dawned on me. As I mentioned, I'm working with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. We're in the process we started recording a new album before the quarantine happened, and we're just about to go back out on the road, and we're going to spend 2 days working on the 2 albums. The guy who owns the studio, Ray Kennedy, is a hoarder of vintage gear. Mm-hmm. He has the most incredible stuff in his studio you will ever. He has a Fender jazz bass, which is the prototype, which was a gift from Leo Fender to Don Everly.
Oh, wow.
So Ray bought that bass from Don Everly, and Ray put it in my hands the first day we started recording, and that's what's on this new Dirt Band album. I'm playing Don Everly's prototype jazz bass from 1960.
Wow.
So it's just, yeah. Yeah. The Everly Brothers. Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned Ray years ago. Yeah, Ray was on a show I was doing at the time, and he was opening up for Alabama, who obviously you've got a connection to. But so we recorded the interview to go on the radio show, and somehow motorcycles come up. And the next thing you know, the next 40 minutes is Ray and I talking motorcycles, and the enthusiasm he had was just unbelievable. And we wrap it up, somebody pulls him up to the side, so we didn't get to say goodbye, thank you, whatever. He comes chasing after me through the parking lot at the venue to thank me for having him on the show and enjoyed the conversation, what have you. That says a tremendous amount about him as a person.
Oh, there's no other way to describe the first of all, yes, he's an amazing person. And maybe this is a little too tech-known. His studio is this one enormous room, and the walls are covered with vintage instruments. And he has you play his instruments. It's the Ray Kennedy thing. And I got into it. I sort of looked at, this is Ray's, he's building this grid work to hearken down the universe. And, I play a precision bass, which has a wider neck. I have kind of longish fingers. So it was a second for me to adjust to a jazz bass, which is a very narrow fretboard. But again, I just had to get into the whole Ray Kennedy system. And he's made amazing records with some, and again, he's a good man. His wife, Siobhan is lovely. It's just, yeah, I can't say enough about him.
Good people, good music.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we mentioned, Alabama. Hometown Honeymoon.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
Hometown Honeymoon is actually my parents' story. But Josh Leo was the producer who produced Fishin in the Dark. He had then gotten the job to produce Alabama. So we wrote Hometown Honeymoon for Alabama. And again, my parents being immigrants, my mother, they were an arranged marriage. They never went on a honeymoon, and my mother never forgave my father for that. But that's really the beginnings of the song. And, Josh, once again, made an amazing record. It was a #1 country record for Alabama. So that's a real blessing for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, another, huge hit that you were around that time was Honky Tonk Heart for Highway 101.
Highway 101.
You and Russell did.
Russell Smith. Yeah. Russell Smith, lead singer and primary songwriter for the Amazing Rhythm Aces, a member of Mensis, just a brilliant man, funny, irreverent, just we became buddies, and we wrote that song Honky Tonk Heart, and our friend Paul Worley and his partner Marshall Morgan produced that for Highway 101. And Russell and I wrote a bunch of songs, and then I know this isn't what you were asking, but Russell and I and Vince Melamed, who's a very good friend of mine, also a great songwriter who wrote Walk Away Joe for Trisha Yearwood. Russell and Vince and I, as a goof, started working up these arrangements. I had heard in my head the Temptation song My Girl as a 6/8 bluegrass waltz. I'm not well, So I kept hearing this, and Sam and Dave's Hold On, I'm Coming as a double time bluegrass song. So we were hanging out one summer day here, which is miserable hot, and we're just complaining. We're not doing anything. And I pick up the guitar and I said, hey, check this out. And I sang them these two ideas. Vince Melamed had worked as Bobby Womack's band leader. So Vince has a very, very broad vocabulary of R&B. Russell is from Carthage, Tennessee, was a disc jockey in Memphis, but also grew up on bluegrass and the Flat and Scruggs show. So between the two of them, within about 20 minutes, we had an entire repertoire of bluegrass arrangements of classic R&B songs. We started doing this. We called up every bluegrass guy we knew. See, I was in another band with Vince at the time with Josh Leo. So we were going to open for our other, for this other band. Vince and I had this other band. We called up every bluegrass guy we knew to come and be part of this new thing. And the only guy that showed up was Bernie Ledden. Bernie Ledden, founding member of the Eagles, Burrito Brothers. And I'm convinced to this day that when I said, hey man, me and Russell and Vince are doing this thing, I'm convinced he thought I meant Vince Gill. So when he showed up, he was the only guy there besides me and Vince and Russell. He just sat there with his arms crossed going, what on earth have I gotten myself into? Anyway, we worked up this thing. We played one night at the Bluebird, and we costumed up for it. I made a suit that made me look like I weighed 300 pounds. And we called ourselves, again, Russell Smith came up with the name Run C&W.
Which would be this album right here.
Look at this. I'm sitting here talking. He's holding the punchline. So we played this first show at the Bluebird, and the audience looked like that scene in Blazing Saddles where the audience is an oil painting. They don't know what they're listening to. But we did this a few times, and the head of A&R from MCA Records called us up. And his name is Tony Brown. He was Elvis's piano player.
Mhm.
What a great producer, is a great producer. He calls up and says, hey, y'all heard that song, Achy Breaky Heart? I hate that damn thing. Why don't y'all do a parody of it? So once again, we got with Russell. And Russell came up with the idea to write a song called Itchy Twitchy Spot about skeeter and tick bites. And that's what we wrote the song about. Don't touch that spot, that itchy twitchy spot, to the tune of Achy Breaky Heart. And that turned into a 2-record deal. We made problems for MCA before the label finally figured out, what are we doing? But I had some fun. Oh, man, we all had some fun. We opened for Spinal Tap here in Nashville. We got to do stuff, man. I'm telling you. We did a video and just everybody in the music business that was available showed up to be in that video. Jimmy Buffett introduced us. You know, we had stupid fun. And again, it gets back to what I talked about earlier. Having such an unusual name opened a lot of doors for me and just put me in circumstances that, you know, I was in the right place at the right time a number of times. Just the right number of times to make it all work for me.
Well, again, there's that divine intervention thing.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, talk about Run CW. 2 things. One, on Into the 21st Century, the Unchained medley.
Yeah.
Just absolutely brilliant. I can't tell you, Jim, how many times I've played that for people, and they look at me. In front of, I'll tell them, here, I'm going to play you something.
Yeah.
And then it starts, and they got to get this look on their face, and then they gets through, and then by the time he gets to Stop in the Name of Love, they're looking at me going, this is great. So, but it's amazing, you know, watching the response. To first, they don't know what to think, how to respond to it. And then by the end of the song, they're, you know, going, this is great. You know, where can I get that? Now, a second part of it, at the time that you guys had the first album out, I was doing a show with Carlene Carter. And Carlene spent, I think, as much time talking about you guys as what she did her own record. And she just kept telling me, you've got to hear this. You've got to hear this. I'm telling you, I have heard it. It's great. Oh my gosh, these guys are great. You got to hear this. You got to see them. You got to go see them.
Carlene is 1 in a million, man. She's just a delight, you know. Yeah, I can't say enough good about her. She's sweet, and she's music business royalty. Mm-hmm. And yeah, wrote a song, sang with her. As a matter of fact, she had a single out called "I Fell in Love," and there's a dancer that's going, "What you want to do that for?" Well, I'm one of the 3. That's me and Vince Melamed of Run CW and Kevin Welch.
Another great songwriter.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, you've sung background for a ton of folks. So Roseanne and Clint Black and Martin Murphey and Kenny Rogers, who recorded one of your songs as well. So
yeah.
How did you get into being a go-to background vocalist guy?
Well, again, unusual name. I got to Nashville. I mean, typically when people show up in Nashville to try to break in the music business, it takes about 5 years before people stop asking you, have you moved here yet? Are you off the road yet? I had all those doors open for me. I didn't have to go through that so much. So I got into some very interesting situations like that. One of which, I met Wendy Waldman. Wendy talks me into moving to Nashville. She and I write Fishin in the Dark. Our friend Josh Leo produces it. Wendy is an artist, puts out her own record, and she calls me up and says, I'm about to go out on tour. I need a bass player, and all the guys that I've talked to here want too much money, and I just can't do it. And I said, all right, well, listen, if you can't find anybody else, I'll do it. And she said, "You're kidding." I said, "No, why, why not?" So she calls back the next day and she says, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, then you're hired." And it turned out we were going out as the opening act for Dan Fogelberg. So at the time, Dan had a band. He had just come out with his album Exiles, and his band was Russ Kunkel, Lenny Castro, George Hawkins, all these amazing guys with great pasts and everything. And so we were the opening act. They liked us so much, they put us on to the second leg of the tour. So long story short, Dan had a show at the end of the year that his bass player couldn't make. And he asked if I would be willing to do it. I said, yeah. So I did this one show, and that was in 1987. The next time Dan put a band together, which was in 91, I was the first call. And he put together a whole new band, and that opened up a whole other chapter, singing harmony with Dan Fogelberg and playing bass for him. And again, talent, oh my God. The guy was, so that was, getting to sing is a very spiritual thing. Getting to sing with someone else is a whole other version of spirituality. It's, that was really something.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, getting back to your, albums, Fly Straight Home. 19 years after Fool in Love with You.
Mm-hmm.
That one, tell us about that story behind that album.
Well, it was, I had just ended 10 years as a staff songwriter on Music Row. I was about to be a father for the first time, and I just needed to do something different. And I thought, hey, this whole internet thing, I hear people are making records and sell them on the internet. Why don't I do that? 50-year-old guy saying that, right? So the song Fly Straight Home, when I was a writer for hire, we would put together, typically I would try to get 5 songs together to do a demo session. I would pick my best 5 songs that I had at the time, go into a studio with a rhythm section, and we would record tracks for 3 hours, spend the next 3 hours doing what they call sweetening, doing all our vocals, and then the next 3 hours mixing. So at the end of the day, you had 5 songs completely produced and mixed. And on this one particular session, out of 5 songs, we recorded the song Fly Straight Home. And it was that particular cut was nothing short of a miracle. It was again, the drummer on that track was Greg Morrow, and he heard something entirely different than what I was hearing. And he started playing this pattern, and everybody gravitated towards him. And this beautiful track happened. So that when it came time for me to record an album, I took the same band to the same studio, put that song up, and said, this is what we're going for. This is done. We're going to cut 9 more songs today, and this is the vibe. And we proceeded to cut that whole album in one day. And the creative part was, it was extraordinary. That whole experience was extraordinary. Trying to be a record company and a self-contained artist, that was a whole other nightmare. But that album, I'm very proud of that album. We cut it for and produced it for, relatively speaking, not much. But what that did was it opened up the door for me to now go out and be an acoustic singer-songwriter. And then I made 3 more albums over the next 15 years. And they became more and more self-contained in that budgetary restrictions meant that I would just work with an engineer. He would record me playing everything, me singing everything. And then if I needed a really great electric guitar player, George Marinelli, who I've worked with since the 70s. He later worked with Bonnie Raitt, Bruce Hornsby. He's a brilliant musician and a dear friend, and not like a show business dear friend. He really is my great friend. We were just texting last night. He had his 41st wedding anniversary. Dennis Belfield he was the bass player in Rufus, and he's been a dear friend. Mark Jordan and Vince Melamed, both keyboard players. But anyway, it got to be, I would play everything that I could. When I needed a good keyboard player, I'd bring somebody in. When I needed a good guitar player, I'd bring somebody in. When I needed a drummer, obviously, I brought somebody in. So the first one of those albums I cut with Larry Lee, good friend, wrote and sang Jackie Blue for the Ozark Mountain Daredevils. So we did 2 albums together. And as we did that second of the 2, I started investing in recording equipment so I could start working at home. And by the time it came around to doing Halls of My Heart, I did the whole album at home, with the exception of the drums, electric guitar. No, the electric guitar and that. So yeah, we did everything in my house except the drums, and then I had somebody mix it away from the house. So and that was the last thing I did like that.
Yeah, and that's, to me, listening to it, seems to be a very personal album.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, really what that song was about was turning 60. You know? Yeah, I pretty much lost my mind. I mean, and again, the song Halls of My Heart, I was standing in my kitchen. We were snowed in. My son was little at the time. We were all losing our minds. And I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself. And I just thought to myself, I just wasn't made for these times. And I went, Brian Wilson. And then I went, Elvis Presley. And then I went, Paul McCartney. And boom, this song fell out. And you know, it happened. So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but that's what happened.
Well, we talked about Fishin' in the Dark earlier. If folks would like to hear your version of the song that you wrote with Wendy, Sparks in the Radio.
Yes.
Has your version of it.
Yes, it does.
Now, that one's got a song that I really liked, Heat Wave in the Delta.
Aha.
So,
well, Heat Wave in the Delta, I mean, you know, one thing I never got used to in Nashville is the heat. And as my friend George says, it's not the heat, it's the humanity. But you know, and so one day I just thought, well, what could be hotter than a heat wave in the Delta? And you know, from that point on, it was just stream of consciousness, vignettes of things where you're just, you know, as the tagline said, it's hard to move. You can't stand still. You don't want to do it, but you know you will. Oh, okay. We're having fun.
Yeah. Well, you have written with so many amazing songwriters. When you go into write with somebody, are you like a music first writer or a lyric first, or is it just, you know, whatever happens?
First of all, when I write, writing alone has never been something that I'm very fluent in. It happens, just like I mentioned with Halls of My Heart. It happens randomly. And the songs work in my head while I'm not thinking about it. The title Halls of My Heart came to me when I was watching songwriter Sonny Throckmorton sing. Mm-hmm. Now, he doesn't have anything that says anything about Halls of My Heart, but my little brain was working in the back while I was listening to him. So, see, this is what happens now. I'm 70 and I completely lose what I was talking about. What was I talking about?
The writing songs. Where they come from, you know, music first, lyric first, what have you.
Well, when I co-write, it's an improvisational thing. I studied improvisation at the Groundlings Theater. The Groundlings Theater, like Second City, became a breeding ground for Saturday Night Live. When I was in class there, Phil Hartman was still a member there, as was John Lovitz. And it was a remarkable breeding ground for creativity, for spontaneous creativity. And it was all about listening and responding. You had to pay attention. You couldn't say no, because if you said no, everything stopped. So that was the lesson I took forward into co-writing when I came to Nashville and people were writing 7 days a week. When I lived in Los Angeles, I maybe wrote 40 songs in my entire life. When I moved to Nashville, if you didn't write 40 songs, 50 songs, 60 songs a year, you were sleeping. Living in Los Angeles, coming to Nashville was like getting a triple shot of espresso. Living in LA was like a big bong hit. You know, the pace was just different. So when I got into a room with somebody, I fed off of the energy in the room. What I like to say is we created a third personality. That was what I like doing best, is coming in and talking about what's going on in our lives or whatever, and the song comes out. And so you ask, is it music or lyric? It just is what it is. I do both. My role in the songwriting experience, in the co-writing songwriting experience, changes. And again, the regimen in Nashville is you get together at 10 and you've got a song finished by 3. When I write alone, there is no time frame. It lives in my head while I'm doing other things, and ideas will pop up randomly. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, you mentioned the improvisation and spontaneity from your time at Groundlings.
Yeah.
Did the title track from "Is It Me," was that song kind of come out of that mindset?
That was Gary Burr's title. There is no one I've ever written with like Gary Burr. He is. If they were to synthesize his DNA and then manufacture it, they'd have Adderall. He's naturally wired, and I've never seen anything else like it. But when we write together, it's when we write and sing together, it's so. I consider all of my dear co-writing friends to be dear friends too, because to me, it's an exchange of things. There's very much, I hate to say, there's a lot of love in the room, I'm sorry. The short answer to your question was, Is It Me was his title.
Gotcha.
And we just answered all the questions,
Yeah.
So it was a little puzzle that was fun to work out.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the closing track, Daddy's Lullaby.
Ooh.
That's a great song.
Thank you. I wrote that with Jesse Terry, who's a really wonderful young folk artist out there. And, at the time, my son was little, and Jesse's father was a contemporary of mine. So Jesse grew up in the presence of, a creative brain that maybe wasn't there all the time. The lights are on, but nobody's home. So he and I had all of those, Jesse and I had all those experiences to meld into what would become that song. And then the last year we were out, Jesse opened a show for us and I got to meet his baby child.
Oh, wow.
So, that was very important and very much. I mean, my son has been. Well, my little record company is named after him. His name is Griffin. The record company is Griff Tones. My publishing company is Griffin Pie. He has sort of been it's the immigrant thing in me, for my child, for my child. Well, if you ever wondered whether God has a sense of humor, she's a very funny lady. At 5 years old, I witnessed my son grooving, is the best way I can describe it. And I took him in for to be assessed by a drum teacher at 5 years old. And the guy said, he's got it. He's definitely got it. And he went after it passionately, and he just graduated from college with a jazz studies major. And I noticed you interviewed an artist by the name of Quinn Sullivan.
Yes. Well,
my son was supposed to go out on tour with him before the pandemic hit.
Oh, wow.
They've played together, and he's a brilliant drummer. So, like I said, the universe is very funny. I share my music room with a drummer now. Yeah.
Well, that's great. I'll tell you what, Jim, is there anything that we didn't get to or discuss about your music, or anything that you want to make sure that we squeeze in here?
All I can tell you, Michael, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. You set the ball up just right for me to just tip it in, and made it very comfortable, and I appreciate it so much. Anybody out there who wants a career in music or who wants to be creative, please don't try to be anybody else. Listen to your heart, and the world needs to hear what you have to say. That's all I have to say about that.
All right. Well, that sounds like a perfect note to wrap this one up on, Jim.
Well, I thank you, Michael. This has been a pleasure for me.
Oh, same here. Well, tell you what, everybody, we've had Jim's websites and social media and YouTube channel scrolling across the bottom of the screen throughout the show. So you can go there. The albums of his that we discussed about, he's got info on his website as well. So until next time, I want to thank everybody for watching. Jim, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael. It's been my pleasure.
Everybody have a good night.
You too.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.